Hello there, everybody. This is Through a Therapist's Eyes, the podcast found on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. That's a funny way to put it, I think. You know, that's the way everybody says it.
Yeah.
Found wherever you find your podcast.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And that's
a lot of places, man.
it is. I think we're like 5 or 6 different places that this gets published to every week, plus YouTube. And,
Oh, no, dude. It's like 10 or 15.
when you break it down, there's a lot of sub stuff. Yeah.
20 maybe, honestly. Do you ever look at that list?
Yeah, it's pretty long.
But we do digress. This is where you get personal insights directly from a therapist in your own home or personal time in your car. Welcome to Through a Therapist's Eyes, where this is not the delivery of therapy services in any way, but you get to see the world through the lens of a therapist. I really appreciate folks listening to us, hanging in with us. I've developed a new vision, Neil. It's going to trip you out. But I listen to other podcasts. I'm a podcast listener now. And this podcast that I've found, my friend, who we will talk about a little bit tonight, actually, referred me to the podcast. I should get some pops from them for this. The Skeptics Guide to the Universe. You haven't checked that out yet, have you?
No.
Yeah. It's a cool podcast. And evidently, they've been doing this for 18, maybe 17 years.
Wow, that's pioneers, man. That's early.
Right.
That's crazy.
And they do so I dream of, being able to do what they do. They do like shows, like events where they go to cities and they sell these tickets and events and things. Like, I see us as that, man.
Well, that'd be fun. I've seen a lot of people like that where you get a couple key guests. We have the handful of co-hosts show up and we do like a pretty cool conversation.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Really good. I think having some audience engagement would be fun too.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Where you get have someone hold the mic and be like, "Hey,
Phil Donahue running around to the lobby on our live podcast." I think it'd be. I could see this.
As a producer, I'll be the one probably running around with a stupid mic, being like, "Hang on, I'm on my way. Got to get in shape for that."
We'll get some '80s video and dress you up like Phil. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
So we do ask you to help us out with 5-star reviews. They really are important. They really help us to get the word out. That helps us grow. You don't know. See how I did that? That little rhyme deal. But it does. It helps out a lot to give us, especially comments on Apple iTunes. Please help us out with that. Tell your friends to like the Through a Therapist's Eyes page because it gets pop up and people look and join. So you are a big part. Really, you are a big part. And I thank you for the part you've already played. But you're a big part of growing the show and getting us out there. So this is the human emotional experience. We do endeavor to figure this out together. That is the goal. That is what we do. So as I said on the Facebook Live version, this is going to be a fun show because I have a particular segment that I have listed out that I spent really some mindfulness time thinking about. How do we protect your heart? Okay, and I wanted that because I thought that is a key component, and we're going to do that really in the middle of this episode. But really, I want to converse with you, Neil, and pick your brain and see what you think from a non-therapist's perspective, especially to see like these questions and these dialogue that we have. So I think those are funner shows when we do things that way, just off the cuff. That's why I didn't want you to look at the notes before, so you can be caught. Like the audience.
I've already got my brain churning just from the title. And like I said, I purposely avoided the rest of it, even though I wanted to. But I think it adds an interesting perspective, a different thing where it's not rehearsed. You don't have that time to think about it. We're never rehearsed. But when you don't have the thought process behind or the time to process it, you can get some very interesting answers because it really is not guarded. It's like, oh, here's what I thought. Like, ooh, did I mean to say that?
Did I filter this? That's what it is. A danger. We actually talked about how we're going to title it. I think we'll tighten that up after. But a danger to marriage ? Workplace and friendships, and part of what we really want to do today is answer this question. And I think it's an interesting question. So let's start there, right off the get go. Right, like, can you have friendships with the opposite sex in marriage? That might end up being the title, but I think we'll maybe stay with what we had. It's a good question.
It's a great question. That's a big thing that, I think anyone in a relationship, whether it's even just down to a boyfriend, girlfriend, you have those things where the significant other has those friends that maybe are from before the relationship or people that get.
So there's timing.
How do you handle that? Is it a bigger deal or not? Yeah, it's something that's universal, I would think. Like any place with relationships has that question,
And I think it gets what you just triggered my thought to think about is how different this is, which I didn't have a segment on this, probably should have, but how different this is between your first marriage experience when you're younger and whatnot versus your second or third marriage. This is a very different flavor for that. So I'm probably going to maybe give a qualifier, I guess, in the beginning, because I think previous to just now, I was thinking of this more in the, the traditional sense when you get married, earlier on. But maybe hold me honest. We'll sprinkle in a lot of people are married for the second time, third time, and that changes the dynamic, I think, a lot.
Are you thinking about because of exes? Are you thinking just in general? Because
a lot of things, yeah. Kids, co-parenting, exes, ex-wives, and how that works, and I think it definitely has a different flavor.
Yeah, that adds a whole other layer of complexity when you deal with a second, third marriage.
It does. Yeah, it does. So we'll sprinkle that in, but I think to be genuine, I was thinking more without that component. Glad I thought of that.
Yeah. I think having the context of first marriage is still enough meat to cover.
Yes, it is. So can I pin you yes or pin you on no? Where are you going on the chalkboard? I know, it's terrible, isn't it?
I think majority-wise, it's usually, I would say it's a no.
Interesting.
Personally, on the majority side. And there's many reasons with that, but I think when you do have that friendships with an opposite sex, there is that weird line that can easily cross if you don't do boundaries. And like I said, it also depends on your personality. Some people's personality, they're okay with it because there's a separation. Some people can get overly attached to that person, and there's that fear. And I also find sometimes
big word.
Yeah. And then I also find, I think about my wife. I mean, we have the friends that we kind of hang out with. Like if you have the couple, I might get along with the wife, but I'm not going to go hang out with the wife by myself kind of thing. There's a difference.
Right. Isn't there? There is that dynamic.
So that's so for me, as a majority rule, I'd say I'm leaning towards the no side.
Okay.
Personally.
Glad I did it that way. And I think this is gosh, it would be fun to do like a survey research-based project to see what people's general responses are if you had to pin down to a yes or a no. I mean, I think you have to put a maybe on it, though, because I'm sure people would give in their explanations, not an absolute. What that breakdown would be gender-wise, what that breakdown would be abandonment personality versus engulfment personality, which refers to episode 11 and 101 that I always refer people to as a basis point, a foundational point on marriage that we took deep dives on and I talk about all the time. I'll spare us this time, Neil, just so you know, you won't have to give an explanation. I thought, do I need to do this 2 weeks in a row? And how many times have we done this? But that's huge. It would be interesting to see, though, how people break down. Gender, culture, just how people see that, because I think this is something that people wonder about a lot and have lots of problems, really wrapped around in their marriage.
Yeah. And like I said, it just adds an added layer of dynamics on there's just so many layers to that. Like it's what is your relationship like with your spouse? What is your spouse like? What are you like? What is the other person like? There's these different levels of, like you said, with the personalities, there's all these different layers that add a lot of variables. And that's why, like I said, I'm going to say no because there's too many variables to say
for it to be safe.
Yeah, for it to be safe on a routine basis. But now there's always exceptions to the rules, depending on personalities. And do you keep it workplace related or, friends? Like, have you clearly set your boundaries, which is episode something that we've talked about.
Yeah, there is an episode on that. Listen, I will make this pledge that by the end of this conversation, you're going to have a crap ton more clarity about this issue, right? You're you're going to have a much sounder view if this is a question where you're thinking right now, which would be fun to time this up if we have listeners on Facebook Live. Pop a survey there and give your immediate response to see, like, what is it? And if you're listening to this even in days later, type in right now to the Facebook Live, yes or no. That would be fun to see what people think about that fundamental question. Can you have friendships with an opposite member gender in marriage? And so that's a pledge I'm going to make. So yeah, that's interesting. So here's a topic that is absolutely, like, wow, kind of dynamic. So off the front end of this, I wanted to cover a little bit of my thoughts about actual affairs that happen. Okay? Because we do have affairs. They occur. They are a part of a relationship more times than not. And honestly, relationships that end at that point and relationships that do not end at that point. And that's an important understanding to develop. Because we have this belief, particularly when you're younger and whatnot, like, you ever do that, I'm out, I'm done. And I will submit to you that does not have to be an end spot. But one of the things that really, really is important when an affair does happen, an emotional affair or a physical affair, is a really difficult question to ask that I've kind of walked through with people in therapy experiences. What triggered, or what was that affair that happened, whether you intended it or not? What was that about? Right? What happened there? What are the causal agents, if you will? And those are really important questions because something happened, and it may have been immediate, and more often it was building, and there are signs and danger points that go along the way. Because I can't tell you how many times I've been in my office with somebody that has behaved in an affair, acted out that way, and they're literally, legitimately, genuinely looking at me saying, I have no idea how this happened. I really do not have any clue how this happened. I did not intend this. I'm reading your face a little bit. Maybe you see it on the YouTube version. What's the expression?
It's that slippery slope that you don't realize you're getting into. It's kind of like if you walk down a hill and then you turn and you look up and you're like, that's a really big hill I just walked down. Now I got to get back up it. It's one of those gradual things you don't realize. Or it's the frog in the pot type of thing where you put the frog in the pot and you start cooking it, boiling the water, and it just sits there because the temperature gradually rises till it gets almost like, oh crap, it's too late, I'm already cooked. It's that same idea that the intentions, there's a lot of times when the intentions are never there.
Love the metaphor.
But the reality is that you let that one crack happen, and
right, which is why I want to spend good time tonight in the segment that we're going to do on protecting your heart. That's an expression. You ever hear that expression?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a generally thought of thing before, but I would argue that a lot of people have no idea how to do that. None, very little, honestly. It makes me like, I think people that. Well, so you've heard that expression. Does that sound surprising that people really don't really have thoughts on specifics on how to do that?
I think it's one of those things you don't realize the power when something intrudes in your heart, and they take it for granted how important it is to protect. I think that's why people don't take it as seriously.
Minimized intention.
Yeah, they minimize it. So, I think that's the thing is until you get to that point where you've caused that damage or you've gone past that point, you start realizing, oh shoot, I needed to be more on top of this. And so
to get back to that, when affairs do happen, I really would suggest, honestly, this is a great reason for a therapy experience if that has happened, whether your spouse knows or doesn't know, because both are the case. We can do a whole segment on that, but I won't have time today. This is a question that's really important. What about this that happened? And I can't give you an answer right now. a standard sort of answer. The closest that I can come to that is unmet needs were present, whatever those may be. But there's a lot of stuff that goes into the psychology, the boundary development, the life experiences that you've had that are really important in a safe environment to explore. Because that crack happened, sometimes that fissure happened, to use a bigger word, and you've got to kind of manage your own responsibility internally that led to such a big deal. And this is a big deal. This is not a simple thing. This is a big deal. Generally speaking, very rarely is it a impulsive, mundane. Not
only time I would ever think it'd be that as a drinking situation.
Yeah.
But there's
interesting thought. But,
the idea that you go out with your buddies and you start drinking, you drink a little bit too much, but then it goes back.
But even then, yeah,
there's an inherent something. Something led you to get to that point where you're thinking you need that. You need that person's hot. Oh, hey.
Which is interesting that you bring that up, and we're both balking at that a little bit because you know what? That is no excuse. That's not like a free card or a freebie, like a mulligan.
Yeah.
No, I don't care how drunk you were. You might have blacked out even, or have an alcohol problem. Like, no, there's other things that are really at play, I think, that are much more foundational.
There's that joke or something where the husband walks in and he passed out drunk, lays in the bed, and the wife starts taking his clothes off to try to help get him ready for bed. And he's like, "It's like, get off me! I'm already married or something." And you get that thing where the wife's like, "Yeah, that's a keeper because even drunk he doesn't even want." Which goes back to that,
right.
That innate. Even drunk, there's that subconscious where you're that faithful, or there is a crack that's going to develop.
Okay. So this is, my buddy said this, we were probably talking about relationships and things. Wasn't sure to leave him anonymous or not. He said, whatever, however you play it. Let me just say this phrase and play around a minute or two and see what comes to your mind, because I feel like this is a big statement. It was really like one of those things, and I've revisited this statement many times over. So I'm sure that he's probably going to listen to this episode because I told him what was going on, and I interacted with him yesterday about it. Buddy, this one has played in my mind around thinking about. Well, okay, I'll just say it. Neil, what do you think of in the context of relationship and marriage, especially? But the phrase is, "You find what you're looking for." Right, and I think that whatever we were talking about, this is a while ago, I guess, but he just said it, and I was kind of like, wow, when you're talking about real things with your friends, and I do that. I'm pretty involved in friendship. I value it greatly. And by the way, off the get-go, man, thank you for what you do in my life. You're an important person and a really important figure for me. And this one was a good one. So, yeah, what's your mind doing with that? You find what you're looking for, Neil. What does that mean?
It's true. Whatever your mind is leaning towards, it's geared towards, you're gonna spot it and you're gonna find it. It just goes back to an optimist versus a pessimist. If you ride your bike and you're staring at a rock and you're riding your bike, you're gonna hit that rock, because you're looking at it. That's what you're staring at. And so same thing in life. Whatever you're thinking about, whatever you're looking for is what you're going to attract. That's what you're going to spot. That's you're going to go towards. And so I believe that wholeheartedly. So if you're looking for an an affair or something, some sort of an emotional recharge, you're going to find it. Mm-hmm. And if you're not, if you go to the grocery store and you're comfortable in your marriage, you're very happy in your marriage, and that cashier hits on you and you just don't care. But then again, if you're looking for the other way, if they say hi and you're like, "Hey, I think she likes me." It's like, okay. And so that's that perception. And so, yeah, I think your neighbor's spot on. You find what you're looking for. And so you have to be cautious of, what.
No, he's not my neighbor. That's
your
guy.
Friend. your friend. Yeah. I think that's a very accurate statement in anything that you do.
It's really depthy if you think about it.
It's a simple but very depthy
As a matter of fact, what he said was, so Because I've actually never, I don't think I've ever asked him and had a conversation about what do you mean by that. And you know what he said? Because I asked that yesterday.
Right.
We interacted about it, and what he said is that it's a sentence, but it's a conversation. It's not a sentence; it's a conversation. I think was the quote he said, and it's totally true because there's a lot in that. I think I knew what he meant when we were talking and he said it, but it has such depth to me, and it does apply to this question that we're wrangling with a little bit tonight. Can you have, a relationship with an opposite member of the sex when married? And, when you look at relationships and you look at marriage, you find what you're looking for definitely comes into play. And when I asked him what he meant, a lot of things came up. And initially, and I'm kind of quoting you, buddy, he said, essentially, people are flawed. If you dig deep enough, you'll find flaws. The question is, at what point are you willing to accept their flaws and move on? Or are you better off knowing all the flaws? Or is it best to give some space and live blissfully in ignorance? So these are some things that kind of come up when you're thinking about, you find what you're looking for. And I'll tell you, I think I forgot to put this in my show notes, but it came back up again. There's some material out there called the Love Dare, and it's a really cool material to go through when you're looking at marriage. And it's really all about an introspective look. And one of the things that they do in this, actually, I do have it in my show notes. I have it in, I was thinking about how to protect your heart, so this is a little foreshadowing to that. You make a list. I'm going to give the goods here, but it's okay. You make a list of all the positive things about your spouse. Actually, I think they start out with, you make a list of all the negative things about your spouse, and you're just easy to do. And then you make a list of all the positive things about your spouse, and maybe it's more difficult, but you get a list. And don't be afraid and sad or mad or feel weird if it's more difficult to find the positive. That's actually kind of normal, unfortunately. And then the third thing is you take the list of negative things and you crumple it up and you throw it away. Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a simple activity, but if you do that activity, you will really be protecting your heart on what in my book, I talk a lot about focus points. So can you accept the flaws? Because there are going to be flaws. Are you looking at the flaws of your spouse? Because if that's your focus point, that's what you're going to be inundated with. That's what you're going to be thinking about at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's what's going to come out in fights. That's what you're going to be accusing your partner of. That's what you're going to be criticizing your partner with. Dude, there's a lot there. You really do. You find what you're looking for. And you'll even find other flaws that you weren't even aware of. Even more, right? This is such a slippery slope and such a damaging reality, and does play into those boundaries with other people. The grass is surely greener over there. Mm-hmm. And you know what you'll find, right?
Once you build that relationship, you find the same stuff. It's the same grass.
Jeez. Lots of weeds over here. It just looked really green because that's people, man. Mm-hmm. He also said, brings up things of white lies and versus pure candor. How do you manage these things in a relationship? And the reality of is, brings up thoughts also of what level of involvement are you really entitled to have or need to have, access to the phone. There's lots of questions that people have and fear that people are operating on, and trust issues with looking at somebody's diary and how does that balance with privacy, and you find what you're looking for, right? Are you looking? It's a big deal. There's a lot here. So I would love to go further with this, but I want to move on in our conversation because we have a lot to cover, and I made a promise. We're going to have a lot of clarity about this. And he mentioned the cognitive bias that we've talked about on the show. I think that's what you tagged on. Okay, this was a really cool handout. I don't use it. Well, it's one of the rare things that I pull out of my file cabinet anymore. Male-female friendships and boundaries. This is a really seasoned clinician that I learned a lot from over the years. Jeff, I love you, man. You're an awesome clinician. We lost a good one when he retired. He is retired at this point. So he created this because he saw this a lot in relationships. And I'm going to go through it real quick because I think that it gives... We could probably scan this and put this on our show notes and things, right? We could probably do that.
Scan it, or I can retype it. Either way, we can get it out there so they can download it if they want to. If you want to put it out there with his information,
because it really makes you think about a key component in answering the question: can you have male and female friendships outside of your marriage when you're married? The boundaries are huge. So he thought through this and staged it out into 8 stages. And in the middle, you enter into a danger zone. And this is specifically at the workplace, but I've used this in ways where, like other groups that you might be a part of, neighborhood groups or what do you call them, the HOA groups, and things like this where you engage in people's lives together for a purpose, but then you build other relationships from that.
I think you can replace workplace with any social gatherings.
I think so.
You have that group social gathering versus an individual social gathering. Your birth dates, your, like you said, HOA, your clubs or whatever you might be a part of. Those types of things. So.
Exactly. So stage 1 is sharing with the other person work-related issues and general issues about life. This requires little to no time alone with each other outside the workplace or work hours. So that's stage 1. So a little bit of a lean here when you say, can you have a friendship? Well, now you really got to define a friendship, right? Like there's no clear, which is hard to pick a yes or a no to the initial question because that involves a lot of people. Now, but I remember my definition of friendship. I'm sure you don't remember this. Contact with a person outside the purpose point, right? I do look at that as a component of being, friends, because we'll use the friend term loosely.
Yeah.
And I think that's stands to be pointed out. But stage 2, you share with the other person a little bit of personal nature, such as hobbies, stories, etc. This requires little to no time alone outside the workplace or work hours. Okay. Stage 3, we're not in the danger zone, by the way. Stage 3, spending time alone with the other person and sharing of a more personal nature. The more this occurs outside the work setting or outside work hours, the greater the risk. And then you move into stage 4, spending time alone with the other person and sharing personal problems. By the way, we're still not in the danger zone. The more this occurs outside the work setting or outside work hours, the greater the risk. And that's a key phrase, the risk. We're going to talk about and need to think about this in the way of risk management. But then he identifies we enter into a danger zone in stage 5. Spending time alone and sharing at a personal level, including problems within one's marriage. At this stage, there's an increased amount of lunches, conversations, emails, etc. Outside, I guess we need to add texts. This was developed a while ago.
Bit, text, DMs.
DMs, oh my God, yes. Outside the work hours or work setting, the increased contact becomes more intentional to be alone and exclusive of involvement of others from work. Individual would be very uncomfortable, and I think this is a key. Individual would be very uncomfortable or fearful if his or her partner knew what was said or had been there. That's a danger zone. You see how this is building. Crossing appropriate boundaries and entering stages of an emotional affair. Oh boy, here we go, right? Stage 6, other person is meeting needs that should be primary in marriage. Other person has become primary source of emotional support, confidant, etc. There is the need to seek or create opportunities to spend time alone with the other person. Okay? Stage 7, spending time alone, sharing personal problems, and creating sexual energy with the other person. This may be characterized by flirting and or discussing personal anatomy, sexual history, or sexual preferences. Time together may begin incorporating some physical touch and or gestures. I mean, he's very thoughtful and concrete in the way this boundary slip begins to happen. Stage 8, seeking, creating, and spending time alone with the other person with a greater level of secrecy while the above patterns are increasing. And then a sexual affair occurs. Anything from kissing and beyond he would constitute as an active affair, non-emotional, beyond emotional. So from a non-clinical head, I'm really curious to hear how you hear this progression.
I think stage 3 is when it starts becoming like that danger zone.
Really?
I think once you get to the point where you're regularly spending time alone with the other person outside of a workplace or something like that, I think that's when you start opening that Pandora's box. That's, to me, if that becomes it's a one-off, hey, we're going to be some guys for, we're going to all go out to eat and shoot, everyone bailed and just me and this other person. That's one thing. Oops, it happened. But the other thing is, like, once you start making plans like, hey, let's go hang out after work and go get some drinks, or let's go do this, let's coordinate plans to do this, like, just you and them, it just starts getting kind of that weird, like, even the first couple times that happens, I feel like that's where that risk, like it says, that's when you're entering that risk. But I think that's where you start thinking, why are you even asking for this other person to be alone outside of
because you're friends. So I would speak for Jeff now because I think I agree with him. I would say I'm not speaking for Jeff. Let me be clear about that. This is Jeff's material, and he needs full credit for it. But I agree with where I think his spirit is, that you can absolutely, so I'm tilting my lean a little bit, have friendships, and that friendships are really valuable. You cannot remain alone with your own life in your own head, and you need friends. Now, obviously, kind of takes the element out if you're the same sex and heterosexual. By the way, if there's not a sexual component, and you're a woman having the total friend be, a gay guy, there's not as much risk there, or vice versa. If I'm a guy and I'm talking to a gay woman, then or a lesbian, I guess, woman, then there's not that risk that's inherent. You're managing a risk, but you're developing a friendship. It's tricky, but friendships are really, really valuable part of life. So you would say danger zone. I hear you, and you're not the first person that have said this over the years when I'm looking at these issues.
Yeah, like I said, to me, it's just one of those things where it's just the more you purposely spend the alone time with that other person and not have your significant other or coworkers or other friends involved, it's that slippery slope that you can start. Those feelings can start, and that's, like I said, once it's that alone time, you kind of don't have those buffers in place,
which is a very important component. I think it's on a section. Maybe we'll come back to it, but I'll bring it up now. I want to highlight, your spouse knows. Mm-hmm. This is, I think, a big part, which he might even lay out in the danger zone, is secret.
Yeah, the secrecy. That's it. When you don't want to tell your significant other for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Whether you're, because
it's a problem.
If you're ashamed of the friendship
or fearful,
yeah, those two things. It's like, well, why? What's the point of that? And
now you got something going on.
If you're fearful, that could be the significant other's issue, because there could be a jealousy issue on that part.
Right.
But the reality is if there's that layer of negative energy and vibe with that friendship, it's probably a sign that you probably shouldn't move forward with it personally.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about risk management here, because friendships are so valuable that risk management is important. And there's obviously, no absolute with this, but man, when you get into the secrets world and some of these danger, when you enter into that danger zone, wherever you might interpret it as being, of course, your danger zone is going to be a whole lot earlier if you say, no, none of this, you can't do this at all. Mm-hmm. Your danger zone is going to be a little bit maybe too loose if you're saying, oh, this is absolutely not an issue. This is stupid. Yeah. This whole topic is stupid. The answer is, of course, yes, you can. You're managing a risk, and it is a real risk.
Yeah.
That I can't be more clear about.
Yeah. And I think friendship's an interest, even not, because I was just thinking about, you see all those stories about the guys who has they're his college buddies that his wife hates, or usually it's the wife that hates. Well, there's the other way too.
No, it absolutely goes both ways.
But it's one of those things that's like, even in those cases, if you don't want to tell your significant other about that friendship, it's like, where's the problem come in? Is it your friends? Is it your spouse? Where is it? So it's kind of thinking about like, even same-sex friendships can even be an issue, but it's a little bit different. It's not a sexual betrayal of relationship. It's just more of just a dislike. I don't know.
It gets into having primary needs met, which I know is a weird topic in and of itself, right? Like, what do you need in your marriage? I don't think people think about it. I mean, it stumps me when I think about it. Sometimes it's a tough question. So that being said, when you begin to get needs met intently, even with other friends and things, like, that points at an issue that probably needs to be addressed. Not affair related, just, friendship related with the same sex. Because now, also realize, if you think marriage is going to meet all your needs, no.
There's a reason why you got your buddies you hang out with, because there's things that you do with your buddies that if you did those to your wife, she's going to be pissed. Yes. I think about the time
there's a Neil quote. I got to highlight that. And then you go, if you do to your wife what you do to your buddy, she's going to be pissed. That's awesome.
I remember the stuff like me and my high school friend. We'd mess around and you'd snap them with a towel, or you'd pull some
don't
prank.
Do that to your wife.
I'm just like, as guys, there's a difference in relationships, how guys usually hang out. There's that competitive nature. There's that need that gets met, where when it's your spouse, it's like, I'm not really going to race her up this mountain or try to, do this or do that. And like, there's just a difference in a relationship. So
all the women are listening or screaming about, well, I know you use the women perspective. I wouldn't do this to my wife. We try to say this to my husband or whatever, but we got two guys here. Sorry, ladies. We're doing our best.
Depending on the woman, how many, do they want to go get a mani-pedi with their husband and go gossip about the latest? There's just a difference in the relation, and
there is.
And sometimes there are husbands that'll go get mani-pedis with their wife. And,
I don't understand those guys, but yeah.
My wife works.
I have a thing. Let me qualify that. I have a thing about like pedicures and manicures. I guess but even my fingers and hands. But dude, don't mess with my feet, yo. Like that. That can't be. I have a thing there.
I've never had one, so I don't know. But it's just. But
dudes tell me too. It's like, oh, it's so awesome.
And to me, I think it's great if a relationship can build to that, where the other person is meeting those types of needs sporadically. But I think you kind of hit on that when it comes to the needs in a marriage. I don't think you really know what you need either until you don't have it, or they meet those needs and you're super happy about it. That's one of the things that's hard for people to really say. When you're looking at pre-marriage and counts, like, what do I really need? I need a woman that's this, or I need a guy that's this. You honestly, you can do your best guess, but until you get in that relationship with that person where they feel those needs, or you get in that relationship and those needs are no longer met, you really don't know what you need or don't need. And that's kind of
it's interesting. That's a part of what, maybe you think about. We won't go too far on this either, because that's another shoot off that we can go on to. Is that a part of what's super different about before and after the moment or the day of I do, and I think that is part of what is, boy, is there a misconception or a misperception out there that my spouse will meet all my needs. This is my guy. This is my gal. This is it. And no, like I said, you do need friendships. It is super important. It's just this topic today is like the risk management of, what are you doing in the boundaries and in the context of that relationship?
Yeah.
So let's spend a little bit of good time here, because one of the things I really want you to understand is, what is this concept that you may have heard of, protecting your heart? This is crucial if you're engaging in relationships outside. Now, this might come naturally to you. It might be like, oh, I don't even have to protect my heart, because, this is my sister. This is not somebody I'm going to be with. There's nothing there. There's just no sexual attraction, whatever. Be mindful of the fact that, well, yeah, you know what, but still, right? Like, there's a thing there with, the potential development. You never know what's going to happen in stages of your life. And this catches people off guard. I see it in my therapy office. People are just deadpanned, shocked. I have no idea, Chris, how this happened. I mean, we have to explore and really work on identification of things there. So this happens.
So my question as a therapist, how many of those do you actually, when you talk to them and they say, I don't know how this happened, do you look at them and be like, it's not that, when you see it from the outside, do you see me like, it's really not that complicated? Or how many of these are really like, you as the professional have to really dive in and be like, I don't get it either. Like, honestly, from your side, like, you've done this for since 1995. Like, are you at a point now that you're kind of like, well, yeah, no crap, you had an affair because here's these warning signs that even I can see from the outside?
Oh boy, I have to be careful here. No, I don't. I'll be genuine with it. I do see patterns, and I do kind of have sometimes a very much like, oh, come on, like in my head, like, yeah, dude, like, let me tell you, this is the direction we'll go in, and I might make some educated guesses and explore an area, because these are, like, for instance, a workplace thing. I just went through a list that's in my mindset a little bit about how this works. So if it's with a work person or whatever, I can go in and make an educated guess, and we look at it. It's like, oh yeah, But then you get to the depthier kind of components that people have suppressed in their life a lot that they may not even have told me about. So genuinely, I can also say, like, yeah, I'm very much like, I don't have an answer for this for you. I'm not in your head. I'm not in your life. And I mean what I say, and I've been saying that more lately. We need to figure this out together. It's an involved exploration that is uncomfortable and scary to look at this stuff. I mean, you gotta understand, somebody had an affair, they're feeling horrible guilt. They're gut-wrenched about shame with this. This is not something they wanted. And they don't want to look at what about me led to this. Like, that's hard work. That's yikes, right? Like,
shame on shame. Last thing you want is to even
I don't want to talk about this.
Salt on the wound kind of thing.
He doesn't know that I did this, so why do we even have to deal with this in my life? It's over, and so it's done.
Is it really over?
Right? You find what you're looking for, and you don't even know necessarily what you're looking for. You're telling me, so let's look at this implicit bias. Let's look at these family of origin issues a little bit, probably. Let's look at your strong sense of abandonment or your stronger sense of engulfment, how that plays out. I mean, there's a lot of things that could, that could be a part of this, and also combinations of things too, kind of.
Yeah.
So it really isn't simple. Is that a good? I think that's a.
Yeah.
And
like I said, the one thing when I said into it is, like, you have all these years of experience that I think you can have a good starting point to where to go to dive into. But even as someone has been doing it as long as you have, there is still a lot more into these than most people think. And so it's, I'm sure there's a lot of people that would call BS. You would say, like, oh, BS, it's easy to know, but, like,
I do have a BS meter.
You don't really know, like, when it comes to relationship, you don't know, we've talked about hormones, if someone's hormones are out of whack, what's going on, not even, like you said, your family, your biases, how is the other person treating you? What's going on with that? There's so many variables.
A diagnosis that you never knew was a real thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there really are variables. So let's get to protecting your heart.
Yeah.
This is a segment that I wanted to think about, and I did. So I don't know. As I do, let me go down through them. Pop out, Neil, when you think of, and I'll send my thoughts as well, as appropriate. So I got a list of several things here. Write them down. You probably want the show notes for sure on this one. I see this as a necessity in marriage. You become a willing partner to what you are open to. Big key here, watch your openings. That's what you said off the get-go of the show. You have a little crack, I would say sometimes a fissure, and you have an opening that you just, oh my gosh, it will find its way in if you're, it kind of goes back again to you find what you're looking for. You got to watch that in yourself. You have to be aware of your emotional self and really watch these openings. I like to use an example of an open marriage. People that have these boundaries where that, for those of you who may not know, the definition, I think, there's a lot of variations nowadays with the internet, by the way. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm still learning some of these phrases that people come up with. But you have an agreement that you can have relationships with other people outside of the marriage. It's an open marriage. That sounds kind of crazy. And there's many, many people that are not open to it. And you might be sitting there thinking, this is rare, or this doesn't happen very often. That's definitely not the norm, right? But when you open up to that and you get into the communities in that, you will find a whole lot more people than you ever thought you would think to see that are engaged in this. And I know that sounds crazy. I know that sounds kind of surprising, but the unfortunate truth is that's real. And yeah, I say unfortunate because that does create oftentimes trouble. I don't want to step on anybody's view for their life, but psychologically, emotionally, that tends to create trouble. So B, this is, is this an engulfment tendency? I said, right? The searching, the reaching out, and the whatnot. So if you're pulling back and creating space, and that's damaging your needs, do you almost create your own conundrum? I don't know if I said it in order or whatnot, but the other one that I would add is this an abandonment thing? It's easier maybe to see from that perspective because abandonment people are feeling lonely, right? So what do you do when you're feeling lonely? You go and find somebody else that can feed that sort of need set. So the idea here is your primary fear can get you. Mm-hmm. Your primary fear can get you. And you have a responsibility inside yourself to manage those primary fears. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, listen to the show. Definitely check out 11-101. That'll help you understand what those primary fears are and how they operate. You had thoughts? Maybe not. I thought I saw your facial.
I think there's a lot of stuff with the abandonment and the engulfment. I could see someone who's in engulfment because it is who I am. If I'm married to an abandonment person and they're all over me all the time, and then I find that person that I'm not feeling, they're not overly like they're
not a threat. This is safer,
right?
It's more comfortable.
And then on the abandonment side is like, oh, that person's not meeting my needs. I feel like they're gonna leave. Blah, blah, blah. Let me go find someone who's like really into me and lets me get all that attention. There's
the belief is they understand me so much more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
This is where I already mentioned the love dares deal. That is a purposeful activity. List the positives, negatives of your spouse. List the positives of your spouse, and then thirdly, go to your negative list, burn it, throw it away. Stamp on it, whatever you got to do. Because if you're looking at all those things on that list, you'll find even more. And if you're looking at all those things on the positive side, you'll find even more there. Yeah. So that protects your focus point on your spouse. And how many faults do you think you could find with your spouse? Yeah, you can go a long list on me. I know that, right? Because there's so many aspects of a person.
Yeah.
How much are you focusing on there? That's actively protecting your heart. Watch out for the superficial realities. I'm sure that's one that people might pick a lot, right? The idea here, of course, is, the grass is always greener on the other side. This guy's a hard body. He is beautiful. He is awesome. He is into me. He cares about me. Oh, man, he's so wonderful.
And then you get past the rose-colored glasses and you realize he's just as much of an a-hole as my husband is.
Right.
Or he's such a bee like my wife. It's really not any better. Because I feel like when you get married, you forget about those wonder years, like I said, rose-colored glasses where
the infatuation stage.
Everything was, kittens and rainbows, and now you're seeing really what's going on. The kitten's kind of twitching, and the rainbow is really not really what you thought it was going to be.
You are nailing the metaphors
more
tonight,
like
brother.
An oil spill.
Yeah, roadkill. Is that what you said?
Oil spill. The rainbow's an oil spill because you get that shine from that.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
So that's just I think people get drawn into that attraction that, ooh, this is so much cooler, so much nicer.
And a lot of times you go back to what you remember from somebody long ago on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I see this a lot more in therapy. It's a new dynamic for humankind. You might have laid out your sort of rose-colored glasses, as you say, about, high school sweetheart or something from the past, and you've spent so much time glorifying this person and building them up in your mind, and probably they're nowhere near like that, but your mind and perception can be a very powerful thing. So that's why I use the term superficial. Be very careful about the superficial nature of these realities that you've built up in your mind. They can play havoc on your heart and your purposeful direction with your heart to protect it. Here's a different take on receiving emotional blows, right? Protect your heart from believing false things about yourself. You can think of this in a dramatic way, in a way of protecting your heart for the sanctity and benefit of your marriage, if you will, when somebody's crashing on you dramatically in a domestic violence circumstance, right? Now, arguably, if it's not safe, we've covered domestic violence in the show. You need to get out if it's, safety above all else. That's just a side note. But when it's reasonably safe for your life and limb, but it's a destructive relationship and this person is crashing on you and criticizing you and you feel it and you start doubting yourself. Protecting your heart for your own well-being as an individual and the health that you have that strengthens your marriage through yourself. Understand, your internal process being healthy actually helps your marriage and protects your heart. Know who you are. Do not believe the falsehoods that literally your spouse might be injecting at you if they're truly false. Use a safe environment, confidant, friend. Be careful as we're talking about, but use your mom and dad, and family and people that can, help you validate, okay, I'm not an evil creature that never goes to the grocery store or whatever silly thing it might be or serious thing. So protecting your heart here has to do with know who you are and know what you are and what you're not. Here's a good one that came up with in my mind. Avoid revenge. I skipped one. I'll go back. Avoid revenge. Oh boy. Right? Maybe an affair has already happened. Maybe you've gone through and worked on this and you moved a year or two down the road and it just bubbles back up or there's more energy there for this reason or that reason. And you want to get back. Let me show them how this feels. This
two wrongs don't make a right.
It's
Yeah,
it's causing more problems, honestly, for you.
If it really hurt you that bad that you want to have revenge because you have now resentment and you don't address the resentment, it doesn't value you or them. It doesn't value the relationship if you really cared about the other person.
And the reality of it here, sometimes you might even commit a revenge. Maybe affair hasn't happened or whatever.
And you think it did?
And you think it did. Now you're doing revenge and it didn't. Oh boy, what happened there?
Yeah.
So be really careful about those welling emotions and feelings about I'm going to get back at them. The one that I skipped in similar vein to the one of, knowing who you are, know your deal breakers. Also, be aware of these sort of red flags that you might find and think about as this builds up, because again, this is rarely an impulsive reality. Side note statement that seems appropriate to be said. When a person takes the behavior of engaging in an affair, that's their total 100% responsibility. Very rare circumstances that you can have things like that. Domestically violent person, you're 100% responsible for punching your spouse. You can't break that up much.
Yeah.
This is one of those as well. When you did it, you did it. It's yours. However, the previous realities Now you've got red flags. Now you've got culpability on both sides. The relationship clearly had things going on. You missed them. Okay, let's get in. Let's deal with those things. Revert back, heal this marriage, recover, what have you. There's a lot there, but know your deal breakers. Know your red warning signs, red flags. Like, that's how you can protect, hold to your virtues, hold to what's important to you. That's hard to do. It sounds simple. You might be thinking, well, of course, that's kind of hard to do.
Especially if you don't deal with some of the issues that we talk about, with like the resentment and the revenge, and you just don't care at that point. And
yeah,
when you get that apathy, that's when you got a lot of problems. So you have to really care about the relationship and care about yourself in that relationship.
Whew, here's a big one. Boundaries, right? We talked about that earlier. Highlight the belief that I will tell you that we can't be involved with each other romantically. Okay, let me say that again. There is a belief that I want to highlight. I will tell you, okay, we're friends, and I like you. You're pretty cool and whatever, but I just want you to know, okay, this anything between us just can't happen. And that's not okay. I just want you to know, it'd be cool, whatever, and all that. But we're never going to do that. Hear me clearly, guys. This is a death knell. This is not good. This is very, very bad. Where this comes from is a conference that I was at on sex addictions, actually. And that was a point that was made many years ago, honestly, that stuck with me. And it shocked me, actually, when I heard this. Because you would think, right? Well, yeah, we're friends and we're talking and we enjoy each other's company. There's attraction. You're attracted to friends, by the way. There's so much to talk about with this. You do have natural attraction with your friend. Same-sex friends. There's an attraction because you admire a person, you respect a person, you enjoy a person, you have fun with the person. I mean, there's attraction there. Not being weird and gay or anything, but there's that reality. But they made the point that surprised me as a younger clinician that when you say what I just explained, we can't have this happen, you have crossed over a massive sort of assumed red line that will not be crossed. That wall, that red line needs to be so strong, so clear, acted out that this isn't an option. It doesn't need to be said. When it is said, when you enter into a space where you have let this other person know, hey, I would, but I can't, I won't, so it's not going to happen, but I would. You are, talk about a fissure. Look at his face on YouTube right now, guys. You talk about a fissure. You have just created unintentionally, seemingly, and really very innocently sexual energy.
Yeah, because when you say there's nothing ever going to happen, there's that reality that I'm saying that because there's something there and I'm trying to not. That's like you said, that's the death nail. That's the nail in the coffin.
It's a death nail.
It's like as soon as you say that to the other person, then that kind of gets that ball rolling in their head. Like, oh wait, because maybe they didn't think about it, but now that you said it,
it grows that sexual attraction and energy,
that excitement, that enticement, that challenge. That there's all these things that opens up a door for,
and that is powerful. Do not minimize that. Do not miss this part, because this is, I'm telling you, it's a death knell. Mm-hmm. It is very suggestive. It is very enticing. Oh my gosh, the endorphins literally start flowing. It feels wonderful.
It's like having a candy bar on the table and tell your 5-year-old, don't you touch that candy bar.
It really is.
As soon as you tell that, they were like, what candy bar?
Ooh, now you can't stop thinking about this. Yeah.
It's definitely something you just don't bring up.
So you protect your heart by boundaries, and this is a big component. I mean, there's a lot with boundaries, but this is a big component that I obviously wanted to highlight. And lastly on my list, identify and get emotional needs met appropriately. I mean, that's kind of goes without being said, and the confusion on understanding sort of, what are my needs, and then asking that question. I mean, that's a actually, that probably should have been on my list. Ask yourself, what are the needs that I have in my marriage? So there are other factors that we can kind of talk about. Understanding that friendships are valuable and that this is a need to have an outlet for yourself and your spouse that needs to be honored and respected. How does jealousy enter into this? Yeah. And is this more of an abandonment issue? I think it's kind of universal, but there might be more weight there. How does defensiveness enter into the mix? And is that an engulfment kind of thing? Which I think there's also universally experience there too, but that might be a bigger thing in the engulfment realm. Like, how does this all affect us? We don't have a whole lot of time to talk about the importance of transparency. I mentioned that before. Honesty. Those are key values to build in a marriage. Trust, which is a key component in a marriage. And then really like highlighting, we did before, secrets. Like, how much is this a secret? Oh, dear. That's definitely a warning or a trouble. Want me to try to take a stab at answering my own question? This is what I landed on. In a word, okay, so the question, right? Can you have friendships with the opposite sex in marriage? In a word, yes. In another word, but. That's what I wrote down. Right? In a word, yeah. You know, if I have to pin a yes or a no. But there has to be that other word, but.
There's a lot of stuff that has to go into this before you have that friendship.
Do you see the bold on the bottom?
Mm-hmm.
We need to protect our heart and evaluate the risks to our priorities. Let me say that again. In a word, yes, but in another word, but, bold it out and highlight it. Keep this close to your heart. We need to protect our heart and evaluate the risks to our priorities. To me, that, boy, I don't know. How's that do? Is that summary?
And that's really where I said for majority it's a yeah, it's a no, because looking at that statement, what that means and what a person has to go through to get to that point, it's a lot of homework, it's a lot of relationship building, it's a lot of self involvement that a lot of people don't do.
Yeah, so you're kind of like, look, it's easier, just don't do it.
Just don't do it. And I think it's possible. You know, I have a friend that I did Spartan races with, and she's a great inspiration for me. And, you know, there's nothing would ever happen. There's just a lot of difference in demographics and stuff. But her and I are good friends.
Yeah.
But then there's other situations. I can't name anything with me, but I could see how other people, because you spend time with them, it's hard to do. You know, I don't think it's impossible, but there has to be great groundwork. You have to have a great relationship with your significant other, and there has to be trust on both sides. Can you trust yourself, and can your spouse trust you?
Really good point. Can you trust yourself? Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Because that's
it's managing the risks.
Exactly. And so I'm with you. There can be a yes, but definitely no is the majority for me because of everything that comes with it. You know, talking about the open marriages. I'm like, you said that. I'm like, that'd be a lot to manage. I'm having I have enough issues. Yeah. You know, trying to keep my one wife happy. Now other people, I'm like, why would you want that? Like,
people say that as a joke, but I mean, seriously, the emotions fly. Oh my gosh, yeah.
So I'm with you. I think it is a possibility that you can have friends with the opposite sex, but you do have to be cognizant of the risk. Like I said, it's risk management, the risk to yourself, the other person, to your significant other, your spouse, you know, what's going on with that, you know? So yeah, I think
real quick, let me jump in to get your thoughts on this before we run out of time, because this is another big factor of timing. It occurs to me, I was listening to you, we didn't cover. You know, you might have a friendship with somebody that's a long-standing friendship, and you know what, like 10 years later, you get married for the first time ever, but you've had this friend since high school, and your now fiance says, "Oh, yo, that's got to go." Like, wow, that's a tough statement. Yo, we've been friends for 10 years. Like, come on, that's a pretty tough request.
That would be a tough request, but if you're choosing to marry someone, then I think you have to honor them and work it out with them to see if that relationship's something that's more valuable to you to have in your life than your significant other.
Well, it matches with, I guess my landing spot, right? In a word, yes. In another word, but we need to protect our heart and evaluate the risks to our priorities. So what are your priorities here? Mm-hmm. Generally, we've talked about it in the show, God at the top of the list. If God's not in your picture or experience of life, okay, then self is top. God, self, spouse. Kids, family, friends, work, right? Mm-hmm. Spouse is way up there. Friends is kind of way down there. So it's,
And I think in that exact situation is that there's a transparency on why does the spouse not want you to hang out with that friend. You need to be honest about your relationship with that friend, how your spouse is, build a trust with them. Do you start hanging out with you and the friend and the spouse?
Absolutely. Come on, baby. We're going to go hang out with Sherry.
Double date, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then just don't keep secrets. Actually be honest. Hey, I want to go hang out with my friend. Can we do that? Can I go hang out? And I think one thing to think about this, if you can build hanging out around something else besides like, I'm just going to go eat or hang out or go drink with them. Like we're going to go hike. We're going to go do something and make it more casual, more active, activity based. To me, that's less issues than just going to hang out.
Interesting statement.
Because I just feel like if there's something like if I
met friends, you just sometimes just hang out and have a beer at the bar or whatever.
But idle hands, that's my biggest concern.
That?
Idle
hands, dude.
In trouble.
That's funny.
So if you go do something that involves activity, go do drink wine and paint, go hike, go to a gaming store and go play games like
What about my yoga partner, buddy?
Do you do yoga?
I don't, but
it's an activity. That's the thing. You're going, go meet at the gym in a public place to go do a class or go work out at a gym. There's that boundary that's created. I think that can help keep the friendship separate.
It's an interesting thought that you have there. I think that what I'm thinking about when you're saying that, because I think I have a difference there with you. It just based on Jeff's rundown of the risks that are there, the activities or non-activities. It's more the emotion. If you think back onto those stages of progression towards danger zones and then actual emotional affairs there's more emotional realities that are at play. What your relationship is based around, kind of not so much outside of like work settings and then other settings he designates, but I think those are those energies that's created, that those needs that are met. You start really deep talking with your friend and creating certain energies, particularly sexual. Now you got trouble.
Yeah, exactly.
You could idle hands. I mean, hell, we could be riding bikes all afternoon and flirting the entire way and talking about things we probably shouldn't be, not being married, and you don't have idle hands, but you're creating a big problem.
Yeah.
But
then again, if you're also panting about to die because you're working out, the last thing you really care about is some of that other stuff. I mean, but that's my personality too. If I'm busy, I'm trying to keep myself awake or alive, or it's like, I'm not really worried about building a relationship with this other person to really think about. But I'm oblivious to a lot of things my wife says. So.
That's funny. So do you think we gave a good? I mean, have we framed this up pretty well?
I think so. I think you wrapped it really well, and I think, like you said, it's possible, but you have to do a lot of risk management.
Do you have a clearer mindset about these very challenging and depthy things, or did we actually open up a lot more thoughts about things that you hadn't previous? I'm curious. Let me ask that way.
I think a lot of the stuff covered, because being married as long as I have, you do have those. I've gone through a lot of these different things, and I've thought about these situations. So I think you hit a lot of the things that you have to take into consideration when it comes to friendships, especially of the opposite sex. And so I think you did a good job. You kind of confirmed some of the thoughts I had. I think you maybe a couple of things I never thought about. I think Jeff's little 10 stages is actually kind of cool seeing the progression, because I could see that. And you talked about, I didn't intend, because it always starts at stage 1.
It does.
So
it does.
So yeah. And I think
in stage 1, ain't nothing there. I mean, there's really not much there.
It's like water cooler talk, or
literally
meetings. It's like, whatever.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think you did a good job. I think that should answer some questions. And hopefully, if people were wondering, everything you covered about protecting your heart in the stages should give people a good idea of like, am I going down that path or not? Is it worth it or not? Is the risk worth it, and what's going on? So I think you did a good job.
Well, let's kick the mics off, the microphones off. Check Facebook Live for comments. We might have some there. Listen, I know these things can be maybe triggering for more conversations and more discussions. I really want you to internally be thinking about these things, because they really are involved, and this is a big deal. This is not a simple issue, when we're talking about marriage and marriage relationships and, the boundaries and everything that kind of goes on to it, because affairs are tough things to go through. I mean, it is, I think I've said on the show, one of the spots that I feel people most decompensated in this stage of their life throughout the life cycle of a person, and that is a big statement. And so this is a tough time. And if you're going through questions and doubts and fears, reach out. Don't be alone. Therapy experience is really good for this process. Stay well. Take care. Hey guys, we'll see you next week.